honey spice bread, and this is a French version of a loaf cake. So let me get right to it. I'll start with the dry ingredients. Equal parts whole wheat flour and all-purpose flour. So first, I'll measure my 1 cup of whole wheat flour. I don't bother sifting my whole wheat flour because then I would sift out all the goodness, the wheat germ and the wheat bran that adds great texture and flavor to this recipe. But I will sift through my 1 cup of all-purpose flour. This French style of essentially a gingerbread is that it doesn't have eggs. So I need a fair bit of leavening with 2½ teaspoons of baking powder, plus ½ teaspoon of baking soda. I'll add ½ teaspoon of salt, and now I can get into my spices. And this is what makes this honey spice loaf special, because it's different than your North American gingerbread spice blend. It has a few alterations. So yes, I use cinnamon, ½ teaspoon, but what makes this French style spice loaf different is the ½ teaspoon of ground anise seed. Now this adds a sweet but subtle licorice flavor. If you've ever enjoyed pfeffernusse cookies, well, then you know this flavor. I also add ½ teaspoon of ground black pepper. Lastly, a little nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of clove. I'll sift this all together. It's such a beautiful aroma, even as I just sift this. I'll measure out 1½ cups of 2% milk. To complement the spices, I like to add some orange zest. And now for the sweetness, a full cup of liquid honey. Now honey, of course, can really vary in flavors. You can have intense buckwheat honey or milder clover or wildflower honey. So really it's up to you. But remember, a strong honey means a strong honey spice bread. And now I'll whisk this all together first. The batter will be quite fluid. And the very last thing, I pour in a 1/4 cup of melted butter. I've got my loaf pan greased and ready. And I'll just pour the batter in. And this takes an hour to bake in a 350 oven, and it smells delicious. I check the doneness by inserting a skewer in the center of the cake. When it comes out clean, then I know it's done. This smelled incredible as it was baking. And after it came out of the oven, I let it sit in the tin for ½ an hour. Then I turned it out to cool completely. But you know what? I'm gonna give it a little sweet touch with a honey glaze. Now, to make that, I want to melt a tablespoon of butter with a tablespoon of honey, just over medium heat. All right. Once the butter's melted, you just have to take it off the heat, transfer it to a mixing bowl, and I've already sifted a cup of icing sugar. I'm gonna add ½ whisk that in, and then I can adjust by adding more icing sugar until I get a great glaze consistency. If you need to, you can add a few droplets of water as well. Just like making royal icing for decorating cookies, you can tweak back and forth, icing sugar and water. I'll add a little more of the icing sugar. It's the combination of the honey and the melted butter that has this glaze set so nicely on top of the loaf cake. What I'm using to gauge is how it sets in the bowl. If it holds its shape in the bowl, then it's going to hold its shape on the loaf. So I want it to sort of be there and then drip away into a smooth, even layer. And I'm there. Perfect. So now, let's pour this on and let the glaze make its way over the edge of the loaf cake. This glaze doesn't set too quickly, so you have time to just coax it along Now, normally, you're supposed to let this set for a little bit to dry. It only takes a little while, but I can't resist. I'm gonna slice right through it so you get this gorgeous contrast of the white glaze on top and then this beautiful, rich honey spice cake in between. Isn't that just gorgeous? This is something perfect to make if you're having friends over for tea or coffee, and the complexity of those spices is what makes it so special.